Imagine paying over $300,000 for a watch, not because it's covered in diamonds, not because it's made of gold, but because of the name on the dial. Today, Richard Mille is one of the most exclusive watch brands in the world. Some of its watches sell for millions of dollars, and owning one has become a status symbol among billionaires, athletes, celebrities, and royalty. But here's what makes the story incredible. The company didn't exist before 2001. It had no centuries-old history, no legendary reputation, and many experts believed it would fail. Its watches looked too modern. Its prices seemed ridiculous, and almost everyone thought no one would pay that much for a brand nobody knew. Yet just a few decades later, Richard Mille became one of the most desirable luxury brands on earth. So how did one man challenge centuries of Swiss watchmaking tradition and build an empire that the world's richest people couldn't resist? This is the story of Richard Mille. Great. For the first section, we should introduce Richard Mille the person, but keep it moving. The goal is to show that he wasn't born into luxury or watchmaking, making his later success feel even more impressive. Part 1. The man before the brand. Long before his name became synonymous with million-dollar watches, Richard Mille was simply a young man fascinated by innovation. Born in France in 1951, he didn't grow up in a family of famous watchmakers or inherit a luxury business. Instead, he developed an early curiosity for engineering, design, and the way complex machines worked. Rather than dreaming of preserving tradition, he was always interested in pushing boundaries. After studying marketing, Mille entered the watch industry in the 1970s. It wasn't a glamorous beginning. He spent years working behind the scenes, learning every aspect of the business, from product development and manufacturing to sales and international marketing. Over the next 3 decades, he built a reputation as someone who understood both the technical side of watchmaking and the psychology of luxury buyers. While working with some of Switzerland's most respected watch companies, he noticed something that few others did. The industry was obsessed with its past. Most luxury brands celebrated centuries of history, traditional craftsmanship, and classic designs. While there was nothing wrong with that, Richard Mille couldn't stop wondering what a luxury watch would look like if it were designed for the future instead of the past. That single question would eventually become the foundation of a brand that would change the luxury watch industry forever. Glad you liked it. The next section is where the story really begins. Richard Mille decides to take a massive risk and build a brand around an idea that almost everyone thought was impossible. Part 2. A crazy idea. By the late 1990s, Richard Mille had spent nearly 30 years in the watch industry. He had worked with respected Swiss brands, built valuable connections, and gained a deep understanding of what luxury customers wanted. But the more experience he gained, the more convinced he became that the industry was playing it safe. Most luxury watches followed the same formula. They were elegant, traditional, and inspired by the past. Richard Mille wanted to create something completely different. His vision was simple, but incredibly ambitious. He wanted to build the Formula One car of watches. Instead of relying on gold and classic designs, his watches would use advanced materials found in aerospace and motorsports. Every component would be engineered for maximum performance, while still being finished to the highest standards of Swiss craftsmanship. There was just one problem. Building a watch like that would be incredibly expensive. And since Richard Mille was launching a completely new brand, he had no history or reputation to justify the price. To many people, the idea sounded impossible. Why would anyone spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a watch from a company they'd never heard of? But Richard Mille believed that true luxury wasn't about following tradition. It was about creating something so extraordinary that nothing else could compare. In 1999, he partnered with Audemars Piguet's watchmaking division to turn that vision into reality. 2 years later, the first Richard Mille watch was finally ready to challenge an industry that had barely changed in decades. Part 3. Reinventing luxury. In 2001, Richard Mille officially introduced his first watch, the ERM-001 Tourbillon. It didn't look like any luxury watch people had seen before. The case was bold and futuristic. The movement was completely exposed, allowing people to admire the intricate mechanics inside. Instead of hiding the engineering, Richard Mille made it the centerpiece of the design. But the biggest surprise wasn't its appearance. It was the price. The ERM-001 cost well over $100,000, placing it among the most expensive watches in the world from the very beginning. Many collectors couldn't understand it. Why would a brand with no history charge more than companies that had spent centuries building their reputations? But Richard Mille wasn't trying to compete with traditional watchmakers. He wanted to create an entirely new category of luxury. Every watch was produced in extremely limited numbers and assembled by hand using cutting-edge materials such as titanium, carbon composites, and other high-performance alloys. Developing each model required years of research, testing, and engineering. To Richard Mille, a watch wasn't simply jewelry. It was a mechanical machine built to perform under extreme conditions while remaining exceptionally light, durable, and comfortable to wear. It was a bold philosophy. And while many people doubted it at first, it wouldn't take long before the world's wealthiest collectors started paying attention. Part 4. Winning over the world's elite. As the first Richard Mille watches reached collectors, something unexpected happened. The people who bought them didn't keep them hidden in safes. They actually wore them. For decades, many luxury watch owners treated their watches like delicate works of art. Richard Mille wanted the opposite. His watches were designed to be worn every day, even during the most demanding activities. To prove it, the brand partnered with some of the world's greatest athletes. Formula One drivers, golfers, sprinters, and tennis stars began wearing Richard Mille watches while competing at the highest level. Seeing a watch worth hundreds of thousands of dollars survive the speed of a race car or the force of a tennis match was something few people had ever imagined. One of the most influential partnerships came with tennis legend Rafael Nadal. Richard Mille developed an incredibly lightweight watch specifically for him, allowing Nadal to wear it during Grand Slam matches. Every victory became proof that these watches weren't just luxurious, they were engineered to perform under extreme conditions. As more athletes, celebrities, entrepreneurs, and collectors embraced the brand, demand exploded. Owning a Richard Mille became more than owning an expensive watch. It became a symbol that you belonged to one of the most exclusive circles in the world. And with production intentionally kept low, getting one became almost as valuable as the watch itself. Part 5. The business of exclusivity. Most luxury brands try to sell more products every year. Richard Mille chose the opposite strategy. Instead of flooding the market, the company intentionally kept production extremely limited. Only a small number of watches were made each year, making every model difficult to obtain. But scarcity alone wasn't enough. Every new Richard Mille watch pushed the boundaries of engineering. The brand invested heavily in research, experimenting with materials like carbon TPT, quartz TPT, sapphire cases, and ultralight titanium. Some watches took years to develop before they were ready for customers. This relentless focus on innovation meant that buying a Richard Mille wasn't just about telling time. It was about owning one of the most advanced mechanical watches ever created. As demand continued to grow, waiting lists became longer, and many models sold out before they were even released. On the secondary market, some watches began selling for far more than their original retail prices. That only made the brand even more desirable. The harder a Richard Mille watch was to obtain, the more people wanted one. In a world where luxury often means rarity, Richard Mille had mastered the art of making the impossible to own feel even more valuable. Part 6. Building a modern luxury empire. By the 2020s, Richard Mille had achieved something few people thought was possible. In just 2 decades, the brand had gone from an unknown startup to one of the most prestigious names in watchmaking. Its watches could be seen on the wrists of world champions, Hollywood stars, billionaires, and royalty. Every new release attracted global attention, and many collectors were willing to wait years, or pay enormous premiums, just to own one. But Richard Mille's greatest achievement wasn't creating expensive watches. It was changing the definition of luxury. For generations, prestige in watchmaking came from history. Brands competed by celebrating centuries of tradition. Richard Mille proved there was another way. By combining cutting-edge engineering, limited production, and fearless design, the company built a reputation that rivaled brands hundreds of years older. Today, a Richard Mille watch is more than a timepiece. It represents innovation, exclusivity, and the willingness to challenge convention. I'm glad you're liking it. For the final section, let's end on a broader message about innovation and legacy rather than just summarizing the facts. Final part. A legacy beyond time. When Richard Mille entered the watch industry, he wasn't trying to create another luxury brand. He was trying to create something the world had never seen before. Most people believed that prestige could only be earned through centuries of history. Richard Mille proved that a bold idea, relentless innovation, and an obsession with quality could build a legacy in just a few decades. Today, every Richard Mille watch represents thousands of hours of engineering, craftsmanship, and experimentation. They have become symbols of success, not simply because they are expensive, but because they represent the pursuit of excellence without compromise. Whether on the wrist of a Formula One champion, a Grand Slam winner, or a billionaire entrepreneur, each watch tells the same story. That true luxury isn't about following tradition. It's about having the courage to redefine it. Richard Mille didn't just build one of the world's most exclusive watch companies. He changed the future of luxury watchmaking forever. Began as one man's bold vision became one of the greatest success stories in modern luxury, a reminder that sometimes the biggest risks create the most extraordinary legacies.